Hello there, Potomac Division. This is the brass audition for DMA this season, 23 to 24. This is the B-flat video. We might be coming out with an E-flat one in the future, in the next week or so. But for now, E-flat guys, you can use this one too. I'm going to start by giving you just a few general tips for auditions, and then we'll jump into the excerpts. I'm going to play each excerpt and then explain it a little bit. So if you're having trouble with it, or you just want some tips, feel free to listen to my explanation. But also feel free to ask other leaders, other musicians, what they would recommend on that one. They'll all have great ideas. So let's get into it. A few general tips when you're preparing for an audition. First of all, please be warming up well every day that you play, which should be every day. But don't just jump right into the hardest music you've got because you know you need to spend the most time on it, but work well on building up to that every single time you practice. I've heard it said every time you pick up your instrument, you have to relearn it from scratch. So spend those time on the long tones and then, slowly build up your range up and down and you'll be fine. By the way, if you're working on some of the more complicated excerpts on this audition packet, you can kind of use the audition sheet as a way to gradually increase your warm-ups and your range and your technical abilities. So that's what I would do. I would just play number 1, number 2, number 3, and go all the way through it every day and really make sure you're playing everything well. You will notice on this audition sheet there are a number of scales. It's very important that every single musician knows their scales, but we especially want you guys to be working on those. When you play a scale in an audition, the auditioner can learn a lot about how you play. They can really understand your concept of key signatures. They can hear your sound and your range as you go up and down. They're listening for a great sound, good intonation, good articulation, and they can get all that just from a scale. So it's very important that you learn these scales and learn them well. I might tell you some more specifics on each of the scales as you go through the audition packet. When you're playing something that's quite challenging for you, I'd recommend starting slow and building up to it. Now, you should be practicing with a metronome when you do this, but at the very beginning, you might not be ready for that. You might just need to go note by note until you get to the point where you're comfortable enough to try it with the metronome, and that's totally fine. The goal is to play it with the metronome and to keep your tempo consistent with all these exercises, with the exception of the slow melody on the top of the second page. But you might need to just start where you are, okay? Don't try to get somewhere that you're not ready for, because if you learn it incorrectly with the metronome and speed up that incorrect tempo or that incorrect playing style, then it's not going to be good. So start with it well. Start playing it well at a slower tempo and then work your way up from there. I mentioned this already, but please make sure you're asking for help with your audition music. Some people might think it's cheating to get help, to ask the professionals how they would do it. But no, the entire point of an audition is to prepare as much as possible for your audition. When you get in that audition room, it's just you and your preparation that is being critiqued. So whatever help you get before that, however many times you listen to the excerpts, however much preparation you do is totally fine. That's part of the process. So don't feel like, oh, I shouldn't ask for help, or I shouldn't listen, or I shouldn't practice too much. No, the entire point is to be as good as possible on all of your audition music and to do as well as possible on your audition. There are a few things that every judge is looking for in every single audition you ever do. They're looking for a great sense of tone on your instrument. Do you sound good? Are you playing with a squeaky sound, a scratchy sound, a fluffy sound, a fuzzy sound? Or is it a nice, beautiful, rich tone in your upper range, in your lower range, everywhere else? If you're not playing with a great sound, people just aren't going to want to listen to it as much. Another thing judges are always listening for is your musicality. That can include everything from your style to your interpretation to adding dynamics. It's more than just the notes and the rhythm, as important as those are. But are you taking a scale, which seems just like a bunch of notes in a row, and are you doing something interesting with it? Are you shaping the phrase? Are you connecting the notes together in an interesting and musical way? So whatever you're playing, please make sure you're doing it musically. Think musically. Judges are also listening for intonation. Are you playing in tune? Now, when you're playing just by yourself, you might feel like you can play however you want. But no, judges, they're listening. They know. They know the notes that are going to tend to be out of tune on your instrument. For instance, a low D, 1 and 3. If you're not using your third valve trigger, they're going to notice. They're going to hear it and they're going to see it, obviously. For those of you who have a 3-valve instrument without a trigger, you're going to have to be aware of that low D, lip down a little bit for it, okay? If you do have a 4th valve, you should be using your 4th valve in that. There's a couple other notes that are always going to be flat or sharp unless you adjust on your own. 1st valve D, 1st valve E, E flat, those are always going to be a little flat, so you got to think high on those. All right, G on top of the staff, that can tend to pinch and be really high. We have some A's in our audition music too. Those A's can be really sharp. A lot of people use 3rd valve on that high A on the cornet if your first 2 valves are a little bit iffy. So be ready for listening to all of those things when you're playing. Play with the tuner, play with somebody else, play along with the recording. It can really help. Number 1, the judges are going to be listening for not just the dynamics, but they're listening for a great sound on every single note, starting them with an articulation, ta, 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 with full breath, full air, full length. They're also listening for a very steady rhythm, ta, 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 etc., etc. All right, no speeding up, no slowing down. They are listening for that D. Are you pulling out your 3rd valve on that D? Okay, be ready for that. They want the dynamics, but never play softer than you can control and never play so loud, so forte that it's out of control. So keep your dynamic range in a comfortable level, and you can practice your comfort level getting softer and louder. Number 2 is a similar concept as number 1. Listening for a good tone, good rhythm, playing the phrases musically. You'll see that there are 4 measures in one phrase. You should not be breathing after every half note. Breathe only after measure 4. Big breath to play a nice piano E right there on measure 5. D, 3rd valve, please make sure you're doing that. Never louder than you can comfortably, never softer than you can comfortably, at least on an audition. If you're playing in a band, it's a whole different story, but on an audition, everything with your best sound. Now this scale has the notes written in, but there's no reason to miss any of them anyway. You'll notice that the 4th note of the scale is the E flat. That tends to be the one that people miss. So hopefully you won't on this one since it's written right there. Let's make sure we're doing E flat on the way up and the way down. Please notice that your D should have your slide out. Your E flat should have it slide in. So that's something else that the judges might be watching for. You'll notice I took a breath before the arpeggio in measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After that B flat, I took a breath before the D. You might need a breath there, you might not, depending on the tempo. There's no tempo listed. Play it at a comfortable tempo, not too slow, not too fast. You're going for musicality here. Now, if you'll know that tune, you'll know that that's not actually how it ends. There's another 4 measures at the end. But for the audition, that is what they're asking for. Please note that the beginning phrase is mezzo piano, not as soft as possible. You'll notice I actually played it pretty full, pretty loud, pretty. And then I went for even more on that second ending there, on that crescendo. A note about this, you can play the entire excerpt of number 4 with your third valve left out the entire time. There are no other third valve notes besides that D, so it's possible you could do that to make it a little easier on yourself. If I was judging, I probably wouldn't mark off for that. That would be fine with me. But if you want to get in the practice of pushing it out on Ds, then you should do that. So it's up to you. Look, D major scale, you guys should know this. You don't need to have me tell you about your sharps here. The third note is sharp, F sharp, and then the 7th note is sharp, C sharp. The 7th note is what people always miss. There are 2 C sharps in there, right? On the way up and on the way down. Same as all scales. We're listening for a good steady sound up and down. In that one, I did it in one breath. I did it a little faster. It's a little higher range, so I was able to do it. If you need to take a breath somewhere, just make it musically wherever you take your breath. On number 6, the articulation and rhythm are the 2 key features we want to emphasize. In fact, that's a good way to practice a wind pattern. We want to make sure that that 16th note is a true 16th note. We don't want to get lazy with it. No, be exact. Keep it short. Keep it quick. All right, those quarter notes and half notes, you can give a little bit of a lift space in between. Ta, 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 ta. Not super short, but not totally long and connected. That's what marcato means. Marched, or marked, or march-like. Either one. I don't know what it means, actually. I'm just guessing here. Yeah. The 2-octave G major scale. It's an excellent scale. Every musician should know this, especially like it says on the music. If you're looking to do Monongahela brass, you really ought to be able to play that scale 2 octaves. Listen, there's a lot of great things about it. It's a great way to increase your range. It's a great way for the judges to really hear how fluent you are in all aspects of your range. I did that in one breath. You can do it in one breath too if you did a little faster or if you just, really go for it. Low brass, some of you guys might need to take 2 breaths somewhere in the middle, maybe after each G or after 1 or 2 of the Gs in there. Please watch out for the F sharps. There are 4 of them, right? There's one at the end of every single measure and then at the beginning of the other 2 measures. So listen, if you're having trouble with this scale, if the range is a little too high, let's say you can only play up to that C right now, and the D, E, F sharp, G, they're just a little bit too hard for you. You're not quite ready for them. The best way to keep building your range is by playing this scale every day. Play it through a couple of times, take a break, play it through again. You'll be surprised at how quickly you can build up your range by just going for it, okay? Let's say that you get this music and you got about 4 weeks to practice it before the audition. That's about 4 notes, right? D, E, F sharp, G. If every week with the practicing that you're doing and working on it, you were able to add 1 more of those notes to your range, you'd be able to nail this scale by the audition, okay? For a lot of you, it'll probably be faster, depending on how much practicing you're putting into it. But this is an excellent scale, and really all you guys ought to go for it. In your audition, if you're feeling a little bit unsure about those higher notes, what I'd recommend is just go for it, okay? The judges are going to want to hear you try it, even if you're not totally sure. Just make sure you can find your way back down again, because that can get a little hard up there on those higher notes. You'll notice I started a little bit soft. That way I could use that to my advantage with my small aperture as I blew the air a little faster to go up higher. So that's what I would do on those scales. Start soft and then let it blow up from there. You can also do it on your mouthpiece. That's another great way of building that range, okay? You can do it as a gliss or just as a scale. Now this is a beautiful solo. Number 8 is a great way to demonstrate your musicality, to demonstrate your lyrical playing, and even endurance, right? Because this is a long solo. There's not a whole lot of chance to take a break. A couple things to think about here. You probably won't want to play it with a metronome, but it is good to use one to find your tempo, especially before you start playing, to make sure you're not too slow or too fast. Totally use a metronome while practicing, but you're going to want to demonstrate some of your musicality by maybe stretching out a phrase here or there, or slowing down a phrase within reason. Please note all of the tied rhythms, ties over the bar lines. It feels a little bit awkward. You must count carefully, all right? There's a lot of those that happen. Another thing that you can do musically is really push through that tie. You might have heard me do a slight crescendo every time I tied over the bar line. In fact, I almost thought about those ties as crescendos. Even on the diminuendo at the end, you might have heard me do a little bit of a push there. You know, it's pretty subtle, but I was trying to make a little bit of a difference there. My mezzo piano was not particularly quiet. I really wanted to bring it out. Think about mezzo piano. It doesn't mean a little soft. It means mighty pretty. So play it with a pretty sound. And then mezzo forte means mighty full. All right, nice and big. So, you know, it's a solo. We want to play everything at a comfortable volume. We don't want to be really struggling. If you can do the whole first line in one breath and the whole second line in one breath, that's awesome. Low brass players, you probably can't do that. So take a breath where it makes sense musically, maybe after one of the long notes, okay? Just make sure you're not adding any time in there. Yeah, and the diminuendo at the end is real nice. The piano at the end, as soft as you can play comfortably. Add some vibratos on any notes that you can, that you feel comfortable with. Just go for that A. That's the only note with the tenuto on top, so give it a little shimmer, give it a little bit of weight. It'll be a lot of fun. I think that might be the hardest excerpt in the entire packet right there. You'll notice I played it with the metronome for you because I wanted to make sure I was demonstrating it at the proper tempo. It's very challenging. Every measure has its own unique features. Measure 1, you really got to hit that G. You've got to practice picking the instrument up cold and just knocking out that G. And then, of course, you've got this G scale, but no, it's not the G major scale. F sharp here, which technically makes it the Mixolydian scale. If you can observe the proper articulation markings, that would be awesome. Ta, ta, da, 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 ta, 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 ta. Right? The beginning of every measure is tongued. You shouldn't be slurring from that G to the next G, all right? You got to tongue the G. Otherwise, the composer or whoever wrote this music would have slurred it. So let's make sure we observe those. At this tempo, it's very difficult to do that. but practice slowly and work your way up. So measure 2, the 2/4 bar, it's not too bad. You know, there's a lot of opens and only one first valve in there, so you got to bang that valve. You've got to hear in your ear these G's and these E's, otherwise you're going to be all over the place. Measure 3, the 4/4 bar, maybe the easiest measure. Going down that F major scale is really fun. I love that. Still tongue that bottom F, but then the second half of that measure, duh, that's very difficult to do. Oops. That's hard. If you had heard me earlier practicing this before I recorded that final one, I played through it like 10 or 15 times before I got a decent take. This is very tricky, and it's going to take a lot of preparation on your part. What I like to do on an excerpt like this, keep my embouchure set for that higher range. That way, even when I'm on the low G, what are you doing over there? Even when I'm on the low G and the low F, I'm still ready for those higher notes. I'm favoring the higher notes with my setup. I really find that that helps a lot, and I'd recommend you guys do that. Hey, I'm working here. Now, the 2/4 bar after that with those A's, you're going to have to experiment. You might find that playing the A's second or third valve, it's not second, third valve, really makes a difference. So that's what I would do, is experiment. I played them 1 and 2 on this particular horn. I find that 1 and 2 is pretty good most of the time. If it's a long note and I want to make sure I'm in tune, I might do third. But that's up for you to know. And again, let's keep going. That next measure, the G, just hold that G nice and strong at forte. This entire excerpt is at forte. And then finally, ta-ta, ta-ta, ta. Let's do full length on that C. Hey, I'm working here, kid. So anyway, this is a hard one. You're going to have to spend some time working on this. It's not going to learn itself, okay? Every day, start slowly, work your way up to it. In fact, let me play it for you once slowly. Let's try it at, I don't know, what do you guys think? Maybe at 100? Oops. Let's hope I don't mess up too much. This is a good practice tempo. Okay, I already sped up on that. All right, this is 100. This is a good practice tempo. Start slowly, even slower than that if you need to, and speed it up as you go along, all right? It's very tricky. You've got to put the time in for it. This is the chromatic scale. This is a full range chromatic scale, all the way from low F sharp to the high C. Well, I don't need to tell you guys, you know how to read. This is a great scale for everybody to know. Everybody in Potomac Brass should already know this scale. If you don't, you should be working on it. Listen, I don't know how to tell you this. You just got to put in the time, get these fingerings down. This is just a fingering chart scale. If you look at a fingering chart, this is what you're doing. But you should be familiar with these patterns, these chromatic patterns. If you're playing in Potomac Brass, or if you're hoping to play in Potomac Brass, you really need to know this. You'll notice on the way up it's slurred, on the way down it's tongued. What I would do in your audition is think about your tonguing speed and don't go any faster than that, right? Some people might go on the way up, but then on the way down, you've got to do it consistently. So think about that. Whatever that speed is the speed you want to go. Also, let's talk about the time signature in the meter here. 6/8, you know, it could have been written in any time, but what you'll notice about this is every measure starts with an F sharp or a C. So every one of the big beats is an F sharp or C. It's a tritone scale, really, if you think about it that way. So you can aim for that F sharp and that C on all the big beats to make sure you're keeping a good rhythm. Da 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 F sharp da 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 C da 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 F sharp da 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 C. All right, that's all it is. You'll also notice that I don't remember what I was going to say. Anyway, same thing here as on the G major scale. Start soft. That'll really help you go up. Big breath, very soft F sharp, as low as you can play, or as quiet as you can play. And then blow that air through as you're increasing on the scale. Just let it flow. That'll really help with those higher notes. If you're struggling with the higher notes, well, all you got to do is play it every day and you'll get better at it, okay? If every couple of days playing this, you strengthen your embouchure to get to that next note up, it won't take long before you're feeling comfortable all the way to that C. On your audition, go for the C, go for as high as you feel comfortable with, plan ahead of time. You know, say, oh, I'm only going up to the A. Fine, that's no big deal. Just play to the A and then start on the A on the way back down. But I really think that everyone can make it to that C if you're putting time in increasing your range every day. It's not going to happen on its own. It's not going to happen just by learning the fingerings. You actually have to do the scale to work on that. Articulating up high is very hard. That's another skill that you have to practice. It's not going to happen on its own. I find that keeping everything firm and small makes it the easiest. On a trumpet, actually, I might just blow as much air as I can through a nice forte will help. But on a cornet, I find that nice and delicate is the best way of playing in that higher range. On a scale like this, it's not completely necessary to kick out on a D and a D flat or C sharp. You don't totally have to do that. If you want to do that, good for you, but at this tempo, you'll be fine if you just kind of focus on your fingers and your air. All right, this is a very famous excerpt. We've had it on our audition music before. A couple things to keep in mind. First of all, the written tempo. This is one where you should practice with the metronome. You don't want to go too slow. You don't want to go too fast. We tend, I think, to play at a little under tempo, but that 92 is a good one to go for. I really wasn't intending on playing fortissimo. I'm playing a nice comfortable forte. I'm not blowing too much. When I go up there in the upper range of the instrument, it's going to come through nice and full anyway. So don't overblow it on that fortissimo. If it sounded like I was playing fortissimo, it must just be the mic on the camera, because I really was playing at a comfortable level. I'm not worrying about getting any kind of bright, blasty sound. A couple of things on this particular excerpt. Don't rush the 16ths. Unlike the previous one, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, let's see if we can make it a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, connected. Ta-ta-ta-ta, not ta-ta-ta-ta. That would be out of style, okay? Especially on the 2 E-ands, 3 E-ands. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, not ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. All right, try to keep it in time. Even err on the side of milking those 16ths, all right? Just giving everyone as much value as you can. I did this entire excerpt with one breath at the end of measure 3. I cut off the tie on the G and then made it through the rest of it, okay? If you're playing cornet, you should be able to do that. I really do not like to breathe before the A in measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't like to cut off that G on the end of measure 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The end of measure 5. I wouldn't do that. I would use that to crescendo. That's really the high point, right? Da 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 da. All right, so let's go for that A. Don't breathe there. You're gonna ruin the entire piece if you do that. Yeah, that's about it. Happy practicing.